In this video, we're going to build the skeleton and decoration of the trips page. So let's open the page. And also let's open the JavaScript file linked to this page. Okay. So first, we're going to go inside the container, okay, set the number of columns we would like to be using for small devices, and then we're going to build this button. Okay, so here's our container. We already have a row inside. So I'm going to go for 8 columns in small devices, which means that we're going to need to skip 2, okay? So that's going to work for small devices. For extra small devices, we're going to take the full width of the page. Okay. So you're going to create a div and give it a few classes. So column SM8 to use 8 columns in small devices and beyond. And to skip 2 columns at the beginning, we're going to use column SM offset 2. So inside this div, we're going to have a button. Okay. Trips. So let's add a few attributes to the button. So let's give it a type button. Okay, this is only for assistive technologies. And then let's give it a few classes to style it. So you're going to go for a button class, a button large to make it large, and the green class to give it that nice green color. Okay. Also, we're going to need to give it a data target and data toggle because we want this button to open a module for us. So the data toggle is going to be set to model as we did before, and the data target is going to be the ID of the model. So we're going to leave this blank until we create that module. Okay, so let's save and refresh. Okay, so here's our button. So right after the button, we're going to have a div where we're going to place our trips. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to place the button inside a div just for consistency. Okay, and then create another div. We're going to place our trips. So let's give it an ID. My trips, for example. And let's give it a class to add some styling later. Trips. Okay, so inside this div, we're not going to write anything. We're going to use an Ajax call later on to retrieve all the trips. Okay. So let's save. Make sure that everything is okay here. Okay, perfect. All right, now let's create the add trips module. So let's copy a module from the index.php file to save time. So let's get that one. And let's paste it right there. All right, now we're going to customize the form. Okay. So let's change the ID to something like add trip form, and change the ID of the model to add trip model. Okay. We're going to change the text there. To new trip. So instead of sign up message, you're going to have the add trip message. And the ID of that message is going to be add trip message. Okay. So let's save for now. And also let's link the button to this module using the ID of the module. Okay. So let's save and refresh and make sure this everything works so far. Okay, so we can see our module there. So now we're going to create these fields. Okay. So let's go ahead and do all this. Okay, so let's change the first one to departure. So the hidden label is going to be departure. And the input is still a form control of type text. And the name is going to be departure, and ID departure, and the placeholder departure. Okay. So we're now going to place a maximum length for this one. I was going to need the user to select, okay, a location from the drop-down menu. All right. Okay, so let's just delete all the other fields that we've got at the moment. Okay, so let's move to the destination. Change everything to destination. And then the price. Okay, so the type of this field, price, okay, is going to be a number, okay, instead of text, because we want a number there. Okay, and then the number of seats available. And the type is a number as well, and the name is seats available, and the ID is seats available. And the placeholder is going to be seats available. All right. So let's refresh the page and make sure that everything works. Okay. All right, so now let's move to the next fields. So we're going to need to create these checkboxes. So again, we're going to have a form group, but this time inside the form group, we're going to place the checkboxes inside labels. So let's start with the first checkbox. So we're going to create a label, and then inside the label, we're going to create our input. Okay, so sorry, we're talking here about radio buttons, not checkboxes. So the input is going to be of type radio, and let's give it a name. Okay, we're going to call it regular, and let's give it also an ID. So the first one is going to be having an ID yes, and the second one is going to be called no. Regular, not regular. And also we're going to need a value that we're going to need for PHP processing, and we're going to call it Y for yes. Okay. And inside the label, we're going to write regular. Okay. So just a comment here, the difference between the ID and the value is that the ID is going to be used when we are writing JavaScript code when we are referring to this input. The value is going to be used when we are processing the form using PHP. Okay, so let's move to the next radio button. So what's going to change here is the ID, which is going to be no, and the value, which is going to be capital N for no. And we're going to add a label, one off. All right. Now let's move to the checkboxes. So to create a checkbox, we're going to create a div. This time it's going to be of class checkbox. Okay, and to make these checkboxes appear like this in an inline way, we're going to add another class, checkbox inline. Okay, so each checkbox is going to be placed inside a label. So if I copy that one that we use for the radio button, I just change it slightly. So the type here is not radio, it's checkbox. Okay, so let's give it a name, Monday for the first one, and let's also give it an ID. Monday, and the value here is going to be 1. Okay, or anything you like. I'm going to call it 1 because that's the value I want to store in the database. Okay, so when we are referring to this input, when we are processing the form, we're going to use the name, and the value of this input is going to be whatever you write in here. So if you store anything in a database referring to this input is going to be that value. Okay, so you can change that, so you can call it anything you like. I'm going to call it 1 just for simplicity reasons. Okay, so the label here is going to be Monday, just like that. Okay, so now our checkbox is ready. So you're going to do exactly the same for all the other days. So just to save time, I'm going to pause the video and just copy all the other weekdays. Okay. All right, now we've got all the weekdays. All right, so now we're going to move to the time. Okay, so we're going to use a form group. I'm going to copy it from there. Okay, and the label here is going to be for the element of ID. I'm going to call it time. Okay. And the type here is time. Okay. So let's change the label to time. Okay, this is only for assistive technologies. We're not going to see it. So we don't have any placeholder. All right. And that's it. Okay. Now let's move to the date, as we can see here, for one-off trips. So again, I'm going to use a form group. I'm going to create it just before the time. And we're going to give it an ID date. And let's change the name and the ID to date. Okay, I'm not going to give it a type for now, because I'm going to be using jQuery later on, okay, to show the dates input like this, okay, or the calendar. So let's delete that. We're going to need to add something else because we're not allowing the user to input the dates manually. Okay, so we're going to make this field read only. So to do that, the proper way is to use the read only attribute and set that to read only. Okay, so let's save and let's refresh. Okay, so we can see all our fields there. All right, so later on we're going to write JavaScript code to say if the trip is regular, or if we check regular, then we only show the fields relevant to a regular journey, and if it's a one-off, then we only show the fields relevant to a one-off journey. Okay. In the next video, we're going to add the map, and also we're going to write JavaScript code to show and hide elements, and we'll also add the calendar input.